My name is Gary Ranker. I've had the pleasure of coaching senior executives since 1989. In that year, General Electric approached me to be one of their very first change agents to help some of their most senior managers change their management styles, their behaviors, to be more aligned with the values and style that Jack Welch was driving throughout the company in his earlier years as chairman. Across more than 2 decades of coaching, I've worked with many companies. I offer a global mindset, having worked as a senior executive myself on 4 continents, and an expertise in helping executives better navigate through their often highly politicized environments. What you are about to see was recorded at a presentation I gave at the Harvard University Club in New York City. I hope you enjoy the DVD. The thing that I'd like to do is to have a little word picture to start off with, and it's become more and more vivid to me. I had an opportunity to live in Phoenix, Arizona. Actually, it was when I was in graduate business school. And one of the really fun things that we got to do, I and a bunch of other buddies, was to float down the river that goes through that city. And as most of you know, if you've been in Phoenix, it's really hot there in the summer, like 118 sometimes. And the water in this river is really cold. And so it was kind of a fun experience to get these big truck tires, these inner tubes, and float down the river. And in that process of floating down the river, which is this word picture that I want in your mind, we had sometimes some really wonderful experiences where it was beautiful, the water was cold, we had a great experience. And then there were other times when we went through rapids and it became very scary. And then other times where we got beached on a sandbar, and sometimes we hit against the side of the canyon maybe. Now that picture that came to my mind, and it's just in the last couple of years, it sort of came back to me about that experience. And I was thinking, what is there that makes sense about that? And I thought, it's because most of us live our life like that, drifting down a river with no rudder, no steering, not really knowing what's going to happen, and sometimes enjoying it. And that's our lives for most of us. And although we think about strategizing or strategy, it's a word that we sort of use for other people or other circumstances instead of about ourselves. And what I try to bring to coaching is to help people to get more control over their lives. What I'd like to talk about has to do with the basis of my own specialty of politics. I had a good training, trained to be a manager, like I was mentioning. I went to business school. I got an opportunity to be a CEO at a fairly young age of several different companies, and then had other experiences. And I came to one position where I was in charge across Europe of 10 different companies, 10 operating units. And I thought all that mattered was my expertise, my ability to manage. And I ran into a political rival. And what happened for me that sort of galvanized this interest that I had out of necessity in politics was that for the very first time I realized that my expertise wasn't all that mattered. What mattered was that there was somebody who was out to get me. And I needed to defend my budgets. I needed to defend myself. Every time I flew over to another country, this guy would try to sabotage me. And so that was how sort of a trial by fire or something, or a birth by fire, of how I became interested originally in politics. And years later, as a coach, I've gravitated more and more towards utilizing that expertise, probably for the last 15 years of almost 20 of coaching. The article that I think you're going to be getting is called Executive Crunch Time. And it's something that we've written, my co-author and I. And what we're suggesting that's really important is to think about what your political base is. Who's out there for you? Who's positive? Who, in fact, also is negative? Are there people who are detracting from your mission, from what you're trying to achieve? If you go further, look very strategically at strengthening that base. Going onwards, it's really wise in the coaching that I do. One of the things that I talk about with people is to look at possible different scenarios. Not just what you'd hope happens, but maybe even worst case scenarios. which people are there for you in this particular scenario or another one? And can you count on them? And in what kinds of ways? But also, the detractors out there. Are they, what would you imagine would happen from them? And so from that, you're able to expand your base, and you'll see some pretty good suggestions that's in a short article. We're a lot further in the book. And what we're suggesting overall is to engage not just really with allies, as I say up here, but also with the people who are detractors from you, so that you've, in a strategic manner, you've taken more control. Back to that analogy of floating down the river, eventually you can end up with a means of being able to steer yourself instead of just floating and drifting in your life, in your own personal life, also your professional life. But you might be able to steer right or left. Maybe if you get a little bit more skilled, you might be able to go sideways. And in fact, the real goal would be able to have total maneuverability, to be able to go upstream if you wanted to be able to go sideways. In other words, have total choice. And I think that's a goal of coaching, but it's also something that I would advise that's extraordinarily important during this time right now. We've got an uncharted waters we're going into about what's going to happen in the next months, in the next years. And it's not just wise. This has to do with our survival, our ability to do what we really love doing, what in fact people need from us as practitioners or people in charge of budgets. So what I'm suggesting is take more charge of your life. Learn how to maneuver. Learn how to maneuver sideways and down and up.